In this episode of Motive Garage, we start preparing our R32 Skyline GT-R for its 1100 horsepower RB32 engine. With our RB32 engine nearly finished over at Croydon Racing Developments, there's still a lot of things that we need to do off the car to prepare for this build. The first thing we're going to do is get some parts ready to go off and get vapor blasted so they look fresh and brand new by the guys at Barrel Brothers. We've already half disassembled the inlet manifold on the 6 throttle system. We're just going to pull it down a little bit more before we send it off. But one tip for new players when it comes to the RB26, these 6 throttles set up on these is notorious for leaking. If you pull it all down, disassemble it and get it cleaned and put it all back together and you think you've done a great job, you'll find that they quite often leak. There's a very specific gasket sealant that you have to use in the throttle bodies to make sure it seals up correctly so it idles correctly. Now, one option you can do is put rags in there. Don't mess with the actual throttle plates themselves and just vapor blast the outside, which is probably what we're going to do. So if I'm sending off some stuff to get vapor blasted already, I might as well send more stuff off. So I'm going to disassemble the engine mounts and get them vapor blasted as well. Plus they'll look nice and new for our new TUFF mounts that we're going to be putting onto the GT-R. Essentially, the Nismo engine mounts on the GT-R are pretty much the same as factory. I don't know why they bother putting an extra logo on them to help sell them easier. We want to go for something that actually is stronger than factory, and the TUFF mounts have been proven time and time again to be very strong. Because when we're going to be making the type of torque that a 3.2 does, and well over 1,000 horsepower, that engine will destroy a factory engine mount on the passenger side of the GT-R. So we could just put like one billet mount on the passenger side, but we decided to put TUFF mounts on both sides in our GT-R. So we'll get these stripped off, send them off to get blasted as well. So one of the things I really wanted to do to our GT-R for this latest build is have way more sensors on it to collect way more data so we can do better testing and development for you guys watching. One of the most important things I want to add is a turbo speed sensor from Garrett. Why do I want one of these? Well, simple really. Garrett provides compressor maps for their turbos. Now, if you have turbo speed and you have boost pressure, you have enough data that you can actually effectively use the compressor map to help tune the car. So many people will go, oh, your turbo's out of puff, or whatever excuse they've got to blame the turbo, but unless you have actual data to prove it, how do you do that? This isn't the only sensor that we're going to be installing onto the GT-R that's new, but let's get this one on first. Now, the kit comes with a wiring loom, an adapter and plug to go into the ECU or wire into your ECU, and obviously the sensor itself and the bolt to put it in. Has instructions that come with it, looks fairly simple, and Bob's your dog, let's do it. All right, a tip for young players, if you're going to pull the compressor housing off your turbo, get a texter and just go make a little line and then make a second one, and then when you put it back on, they have to line up perfectly and it's in the exact same spot as before. So the G series comes with a plug already in there that does nothing, but if you get the speed sensor, you'll see they're the exact same size. So in theory, you can just pull one out, put one in, and you're done. Other turbos, you have to pull the compressor cover off so you can get the measurement correct and how far it sits inside, etc. But with this, it just goes straight in. But we pulled the compressor cover off because we basically wanted to show you guys how it's done. And we wanted to show you that on the inside, when you put this in, where it sits is right up flush on the inside of the compressor cover, as you can see right there. And essentially the speed sensor is like most speed sensors and ABS sensors, etc. It just detects a metal surface spinning past it. So pretty straightforward, simple technology, but something we definitely need. Let's get it in. Before we put the compressor cover back on, I will digress. Check this out, a little oil filter inline that I put on top of my turbo setups. Why? Well, it saves the turbo if you have an engine fail. When we blew up the engine in our R32 GT-R, the Bitzer engine that we built, I had one of these on the last turbo, and basically it caught a whole bunch of metal fragments that went through the engine and saved the turbo. So if you ever break an engine and you haven't got one of these little doobalakis on your turbo, you risk basically frying your turbo at the same time. So for a little bit extra money it costs to put a little inline oil filter on your turbo, great investment. The other thing it also does is actually help if you've got really high oil pressure in your engine, this will actually restrict the flow a little bit, kind of like a restrictor, which is not a bad thing in a GT-R, which has heaps of oil pressure. So I'm probably going to take that off and give it a quick clean before we put the turbo back together, ready to go on the engine. Another thing we're going to get ready for the engine before it goes into the car is the alternator. We've tried a few different alternators and alternator kits in the past, but now we're going to try out the PRP LS1 alternator kit. What I really like about this kit is if you buy a block and you don't have any of the bits that go on there, you don't need any of the factory brackets to fit the PRP alternator kit. It comes with a bracket, all the bolts you need. You don't need anything factory to fit it on. You also ditched the factory big metal bracket as well, which is pretty heavy. And really all you've got to do is bolt up that bracket, put this pulley onto an LS1 alternator like this. And it's ready to go on the engine, that's it. So one thing that's going to change on our GT-R when we put this new engine in is the oiling system. We've got a clear view filter. We recently did a tech feature on these and why we're going to use them. So head to the description so you can check out the tech video on why we're using a clear view filter. That means we're also going to need all new oil lines throughout the engine bay as well. So basically, I'm going to jump onto the Raceworks website, look at their catalogue, and order a whole bunch of new black braided line. And I also want to replace the old braided line on this car with black as well, so it all looks new and fresh. Time to go spend a lot of money. So as well as adding a turbo speed sensor, there's a whole bunch more sensors I want to add to our GT-R. And thankfully, thanks to our relationship with Haltech, we have access to a whole bunch of great sensors. One thing I've wanted to put on that for a while, and we're definitely putting on now, is EGTs. What are EGTs? Well, exhaust gas temperature sensors. Now basically, it is a temperature probe like this that goes into the exhaust manifold, which is getting modified right now to have the adapters it needs for that, and it measures individual temperature inside each cylinder. Why does that help you? Well, for tuning purposes, it lets you know if the air-fuel ratio is different in each cylinder, because a normal O2 sensor is in your exhaust and it measures the average of all 6 cylinders. This helps you tune each cylinder individually, and you can have warnings set up, so if a cylinder has a catastrophic failure of an injector or a valve or something else, it will tell you straight away that something is off with the car and you can shut it down and save it. EGTs are very, very important. So if you want to have individual EGTs in your GT-R, obviously you need to get 6 of the thermocouples, which basically obviously measure the temperature. They then wire into this, which is a thermocouple amplifier. Basically, it amplifies the signal out of this before it goes to the ECU. Obviously, it comes with the wiring loom and stuff you need for it as well. And the other thing you may need, depending on which ECU you have, is an I/O expander box, which basically allows more inputs into your Haltech ECU. So once that's all in the car and wired up, we will be able to measure individual exhaust gas temperature in each cylinder. Another thing that I wanted to add to the car was exhaust back pressure sensor, which I have here from Haltech, and obviously we need to put a bung into the exhaust manifold for that as well, which is also off being done at the moment. And the other thing I wanted to do is add more sensors. I want boost before the intercooler, boost after the intercooler, and obviously in the inlet manifold. I want to have oil pressure coming out of the block, going back into the block, and I want to have a few other sensors around the car. I want to have as much data as possible, not just for the sake of me running the car and racing the car, but just for our testing and development, so that when we do make changes to the car and develop the combination, you guys can see the exact results rather than we think this is why, because data is king. So another thing that needed to be done to get ready to go on the engine that I took care of a while ago is I sent our direct clutch services 9-inch twin plate clutch off to get freshened up or refurbished and give a clean bill of health. That's one great thing about these clutches, is they're completely rebuildable, so they're serviceable. And basically what I always say is if you're pulling your engine out, you might as well send it off and get checked. Now we've done a tech video on clutches and showcased this 9-inch clutch, which is obviously larger than a normal GT-R clutch. Obviously bigger diameter means it can have less clamping force to handle the same torque, so they've always been really good to drive versus the amount of power they can handle. I've recommended these clutches to people all over the world, and every single person has come back happy because you can build it to suit your car. So when we got this respect, I told the guys it's no longer on a 2.6, it's now on a 3.2 litre that's going to be making well over 1,000 horsepower, so they've respected to suit our new engine combination. With the engine over at Croydon Racing Developments getting finished off and all the accessories getting bolted to it, there's things I need to do to the actual car itself to get it ready to receive its engine again. If you saw in previous videos, I'd redone the fuel system in the boot. I'd pulled some parts off the car to get re-powder coated and done some rust repairs, etc. What's left to do? I still need to run some new fuel lines and wiring a little bit better than it was before and just neaten it up. I want to change over to a GK Tech HICAS lock bar for no reason other than my old one is red and I want it to be black. We've also got a clutch booster delete from Platinum Racing Products. Basically what this does is you can get rid of the clutch booster, and what that does is moves the clutch master cylinder in towards the firewall more and frees up some space, so when you do the RB30 conversion and aftermarket inlet manifolds, everything fits a hell of a lot easier. The other thing we have to do is install these Platinum Racing Products subframe spacers. They're 7mm. Might not sound like much, but lowering your subframe that 7mm can give you a whole lot more room at the top so that your RB3026 doesn't hit the bonnet because of the extra height of the RB30 block. So it's all here. Let's get to work on the car and get it ready for its engine. Now with a HICAS lock bar, the actual bar itself is a pretty straightforward and simple idea and process. You remove the steering rack from the back, you put a solid bar in, and the tie rods, essentially that's what they are, same as the front, then just bolt straight into this, but obviously it doesn't move. Now, when you undo your tie rod end and undo this part off the factory rack, you then basically put it back into the GK Tech HICAS removal bar. You'll need a wheel alignment afterwards because you will mess with it, but that's fine. This car needs one anyway, so I'm not too worried. But the hard part of HICAS removal is not so much this bar, it's all of the lines, because the back of the four-wheel drive pump in an R32 is pumping fluid down through the lines to here. Now, I removed the lines on this 10 years ago, so the swap for me now is very easy, but if you still have HICAS lines, you've got two options. Remove them, or two, use them as larger upgraded fuel lines. There's a tip for young players. So the subframe raisers are relatively simple to install, in theory, like most car stuff. The spacer just has a notch in it, so all you do is you undo the 8 bolts for the subframe, but don't take them off. You just want to undo the nuts enough to drop the subframe down, slot these in, and then tighten it back up again, and then you've successfully spaced your subframe 7mm. Easy. So one thing I've decided to do while I'm changing over the clutch booster delete from PRP is I'm going to switch to a braided clutch line, because from factory they have a line that goes from the master down into like a distribution block that I guess is used for bleeding. Then it goes into this huge loop, comes back around before it goes into a factory rubber clutch line. Essentially there's probably what, a metre worth of line there that you just don't need. So one braided line from there straight to the slave cylinder is all we're going to have now, and it's just going to tidy up under here and get rid of a lot of, well, a lot of crap. Let's do it. Plan on reusing those to hold the fuel lines, so just going to clean them up, use them again. Dear Nissan engineers, the way you did the bolts on the clutch booster to the clutch master is one of the worst designs of anything on the car. Thank you for one of 57 terrible engineering things you did to a GT-R. So GT-R life struck again, as usual. What I thought would be quite a simple clutch booster removal is a quite painful job to do on a hoist with a seat in the car, as I nearly break my back to undo the bolts. But of course, the brake booster is in the way of this getting out as well. So you have to undo all the brake booster bolts to pull that forward to get the clutch booster out. So I haven't had to do that on this particular car before, because every time I've pulled these out, they've been in stripped out cars and it's easy. So yeah, that wasn't fun. And Herman, I hate you. So the whole idea is with this PRP piece of CNC billet is it basically, you put these studs in and this replaces the clutch booster. And the whole idea is by not having the clutch booster, you can move the booster back and then they switch over to a different master And then once this goes in like this, basically this is shorter and easier, and basically doesn't interfere with the inlet manifold as much as the factory one does when you go RB30, which will make our inlet manifold swaps easier for later as well. Let's get it in, shall we? So, like many other things on a GT-R, the clutch booster delete from PRP seemed like, oh yeah, that'll be a quick half-an-hour job. 2.5 hours later, it's actually one of the most annoying, frustrating jobs I've ever had to do on a GT-R. Why? Because when the car's on the hoist and you've got a race seat in, trying to get under the dash to undo the booster and then realise you have to undo the brake booster as well and pull them out, yeah, it's not a whole lot of fun. But hey, it's done now, and now we have more room for RB32 to fit with aftermarket inlet manifolds and make our life a little bit easier. So the kit fits perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually just more to do with other things you have to do around it. So just wait for the braided clutch line to arrive. We'll get that on, and then we'll keep tightening things up. But it's the end of today, so that's enough for now. After a big day working on the R32 yesterday, some more parts have rocked up today, ready to take over to CRD to bolt onto the engine. Our 6-boost manifold we had modified by Roger at Mobile Custom Fab to put on the EGT bungs. You need to obviously weld these on, drill the holes, and we also wanted a port welded on for an exhaust gas pressure sensor. Once all that was done, we wanted to neaten it up and look tidy, and hey, why not get some performance benefits of ceramic coating. So we had Tommy from Produce Factory, who has worked on a lot of our project cars, clean up the manifold and ceramic coat. And as you can see, it looks amazing. So when you put the EGTs in, pretty simple. You just get the sensor, you get the cap, and you get a little olive that goes in there. You push that in, do that up, and then basically what you want to do is put all 6 in, kind of line them up nicely, keep all the cabling together. Obviously you don't want to hang it onto the manifold, and then you can then plug all that in. We'll show that on the engine rather than here. So the next thing that we got back was all of the stuff from the inlet manifold that we sent off to get vapor blasted by the guys at Barrel Brothers. And as you can see, 30-year-old parts now look a hell of a lot closer to new. Obviously you can go further than this and start machining them all down and powder coating, etc. But we just wanted to give them a quick freshen up so they didn't look terrible. And hey, they've come up pretty good. Like I said, with the throttle plates, we didn't go crazy on the inside and get rid of all the factory Nissan magic for sealing it. The main thing is the bits you can see on the outside are cleaned up nicely. We didn't have to fully disassemble it either with vapor blasting, which is good. So yeah, there's a whole lot more content coming up about our R32 GT-R. So make sure you click the subscribe button down below so you don't miss out. See you then.